Of the planning board this evening, we just have 3 members. So we're not going to have an official meeting, but we'll still meet with the selectmen because the planning board's not intending to make any decisions this evening, just review with the Board of Selectmen what we're looking at for fall town meeting.
Being 7:03, I will call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order, Wednesday, September 27th. Thank you.
Thank you, Selectmen, for joining us this evening. The purpose of this evening's meeting is for Courtney, who is on remotely, you can see him on the screen there, from MAPC, and I to walk you through both where MAPC is in the project process, and then also mainly to review the articles that the planning board is hoping to prepare and bring to fall town meeting in November. So that said, I'm going to turn it over to Courtney so he can give us an update of where he and Jiwan are progressing, how they're progressing, and then I will talk some about the planning board's process, and then most of our time will be spent with a handout that I prepared just to walk everyone through the intent and current status and development of articles for fall town meeting. Courtney.
Yes. Can I
Share screen?
Yes.
Hold on, let me figure this out. I am making you co-host, so then that should enable you to, I'm going to stop my share and you should be able, there you are. And you should be able to share your screen.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Courtney Lewis. I'm a senior planner at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. And I have been overseeing the second phase of the zoning bylaw project. So as Lisa mentioned, we're gonna go over a few of the priority updates for the bylaw, and then talk a little bit about the updating the site plan review process for the town. I think there was interest to discuss special permits and potential new categories, and then we'll talk about next steps. So in terms of the updates, we have we have done work and provided drafts on the definitions for the bylaw. We've provided the planning board with a list of the terms that are currently in the current bylaw, as well as recommendations for edits and revisions, and additions for the bylaw. In terms of dimensional and density regulations, we've prepared a draft consolidated dimensional table that combines all zoning districts. We've also prepared a draft use table for the bylaw, and also provided a list of potential additional uses to add as principal uses, and provided a draft of how we propose the future uses should be organized. And then we've also done, we've looked at the town's existing site plan review process and provided recommendations on updating that to strengthen site plan review based on feedback and comments that we gathered both from the public at at last month's meeting and the planning board as well. As I mentioned, we've shared this. This was shared at the previous meeting where where we provided an example of the layout for codifying the general use zoning district. This includes adding a character description, a purpose statement for that section, and actually codifying that or formalizing it in the town's existing bylaw. We prepared a draft. We looked at the town's existing definitions, and we provided a table or a matrix that showed the existing term and definitions, as well as an APA recommended definition, and this included examples from communities all throughout the U.S., but these definitions have been vetted, approved, and endorsed by the association, the American Planning Association. So, but we also recognize that that the definitions needed to be contextualized. So we also included examples from communities throughout the region, and then we provided comments and recommendations on ways that the existing definitions could be updated, modified, or edited to provide to have them be a bit more clear and concise. We, as I mentioned before, we combined, we created this consolidated density and dimensional regulation table that lists all of the town's existing zoning districts and as well as the different uses, and organize the information so that the dimensional standards for each existing zoning district could be compared, and that information is now all located in one section of the bylaw versus having it split up in multiple sections as it was before. We also provided a list of the town's existing uses and a list of additional uses to consider, and based on feedback that we heard, and as well as looking at a list of more contemporary uses. We examined the town's existing site plan review process, and the goal here was to provide greater guidance for the planning board for examining development proposals within town, and also provide a certain level of assurance to applicants and abutters, um, so that they could so that a proposed excuse me. We wanted to provide a certain level of assurance to applicants and as well as abutters that proposed projects would not have a significant or negative impact on the neighborhood or the town. And the way that we approach our analysis of this work, we looked at, we had a set of context communities, and we based these on three different things or three different factors: geographic proximity, so looking at neighboring communities like Hamilton, Ipswich, and Manchester. We also looked at size in terms of land area and population. And example communities included Bolton, Nahat, and Carlisle. And we also looked at other peer communities who have recently updated their zoning bylaws or made amendments or changes. And those communities included Hingham, Milton, Topsfield, Weston, and Falmouth. We then, so typically with site plan review, there are a series of components that are generally found, and those include a purpose statement, applicability, exemptions, a list of the review procedures, so answering the questions like who documents are submitted to. It clarifies and notes whether or not a public hearing and a public notice is required for site plan review. It also lists information such as filing fees. Currently, the town has some of this information, but it's dispersed in different locations. Some of it is in the existing bylaw, and then other information can be found online. So ensuring that all of that information is consolidated into one location will help improve the existing site plan review process. Listing the submission requirements, the review criteria, and design and performance standards, waivers, and then the final component is decisions, conditions, and appeals. Based on our review, the town's existing site plan review process only contains 3 of these components, and we provided a series of notes for the planning board to consider. And within those categories, we also provided a document that showed the current outline and provided example language that could be included into the updated site plan review process. And again, we looked at peer communities and communities throughout the region and provided examples of how to make improvements to various sections. Looking at the existing site plan review process for the town, some areas of concern include vehicular safety and pedestrian movement. Some of the things that we've heard from feedback gathered from the community is concerns around safety, health, and keeping any proposed projects in line with the town's existing character. In terms of applicability, or as it's currently titled, projects requiring site plan review, the thresholds that trigger the threshold factors that trigger the site plan review process currently are new construction, reconstruction, or relocation of buildings over a certain square footage. And in terms of uses, the only exempt use from site plan review is currently single family residential. And in terms of criteria or performance review, it includes things like traffic, parking, drainage control, vegetation, amenities, town character, and screening. These are, this is, from that previous list, this is what's considered the review criteria and design or performance standards, which I mentioned the town has, and a few things that are currently missing from that list that are recommended as a best practice are lighting, signage, and water and wastewater systems. As I mentioned, we in the draft in the document we provided of the existing site plan review, we provided examples from other communities, and a lot of communities use a tiered site plan review process. So it's typically major site plan review and minor site plan review. And there's also there's usually two ways to approach it if the town decides to move forward with a tiered approach, and that's major and minor site plan review. And then the other option is administrative or planning board site plan review. And in both cases, the planning board reviews the application. The differences for major and minor tend to be the threshold trigger, which is usually based on the square footage or the scale of the project in terms of square footage, and parking requirements for the proposed development. With the other option of administrative site plan review versus just general site plan review, smaller projects tend to be reviewed by the planning staff, which was an option or a recommendation that we made, and larger projects are typically reviewed by the planning board, just the planning board. And so, as I mentioned, we provided the planning board with a document um, that showed the existing format and layout of the town site plan review process, and provided notes, examples, and recommendations. We also had a list of questions in the document that for discussion and things to consider, things for the planning board to consider in terms of changes to the current process. And so I'll stop there and open things up for discussion in terms of clarifying any of the draft documents that have been submitted, and also see if there are any clarifying questions based on the content that we've drafted at this point.
Great, thank you, Courtney. Thank you for that presentation. I'm going to speak briefly for a minute just because I want to clarify the process that the planning board is working with MAPC on, and then give the selectmen an opportunity to ask Courtney questions.
Do you want to call to order because you now have Simone on the phone?
Right, yeah, we're called to order when Simone surfaced, so there we go. So in the process of the MAPC's involvement on this project, they're going to be working to sort of overhaul the bylaw overall. And their contract right now is going to run through the end of June 2024. And we won't have ability or opportunity to put all of the changes that will be proposed through town meeting. So at the end of their project, they will have prepared all the updates and edits that we want to see in the bylaw, but they won't be be taken to town meeting at that point. And they're also going to be working on zoning district maps with us. So the process that the MAPC is following is parallel to what the planning board's doing, but they're going to be way ahead of us because we need to piece this out in town meeting sized parcels. And we're already 8 articles deep for fall town meeting, so that's a lot. So that said, what Courtney's presenting is more looking towards the final product of what a fully updated bylaw would be, and they have more work to do, but they're also working in a format that might be a final document that we would someday incorporate. For us on the ground here in Essex, taking things to town meeting, we need to fit it into the format of the bylaw that we have so that we have very clear articles that say this is either what we're taking out and replacing or this is what we're adding. So what I'm going to go over is a little bit more nuts and bolts and specific to exactly what we're looking at bringing to town meeting. So I just wanted to put a clarification around what MAPC is doing and then what we're going to talk about as far as fall town meeting goes in a few minutes. But I want to give you guys an opportunity, if you have questions for Courtney, this would be the time to do it, because then the next step is to go through the handout that I prepared about specifically fall town meeting.
This may be a question for you, Lisa, and the planning board, but have we decided on a tiered site plan review or not yet?
That's one of the main reasons that we want to do an overhaul of the site plan review, is to do that tiered approach, because
That's the direction we're going.
right,
Yeah.
and we're going to talk about that shortly, but the whole point of that is as long as we have this sort of general use district that we have, we would like to have some better control over property change of use. So the site plan review doesn't ever offer us an opportunity to deny anything. It offers up an opportunity to condition things. But what the tiered site plan review would do is, if we call it major, minor, however it works, but there could be a category of applications that would trigger what we call major, and major would mean that you would have an advertised public hearing and a butter notification. So we kind of feel that it's appropriate if someone is planning to change the use of a property, that the abutters are notified, there's a public hearing and an opportunity for input. It does not give us in the site plan review process an ability to deny that, but it gives us the ability to condition it, and it gives abutters an opportunity to understand what is going on.
So the triggers, parking and square footage, is that jump it from a minor to a major if they hit some certain threshold that Courtney was talking about, or where are those triggers fit in?
We haven't sorted that out yet, because we're working with the document that Courtney gave us, and I mean, the planning board's meeting next week, a week from tonight, we're going to be going through site plan review in
Okay.
pretty
All right, so it's a
gruesome
premature
detail.
question.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we are working on that. But that's the point, is just to try and have a more nuanced approach to site plan review, because there are some things that come to us for site plan review, and it's so obvious and simple, but then there are other things where you are talking about change of use of a property or a building that it does matter, and we need to be more careful about it. So the intent is just to make it a more robust sort of bylaw, so that we can pay attention to the things that need to pay attention, and then we also don't need to put sort of formalities through that same process. We don't want to say, oh, every site plan review has to be an advertised hearing and a butter notification, because some of them just don't reach that level of mattering that much, so.
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm asking that is because sometimes you might want fewer parking spaces. You want to encourage fewer parking spaces and smaller square footage, depending on what the use is, where it's located, and that kind of thing, so that you're not just, requiring, X number of parking spaces per square foot or whatever, so, but
Right.
you're not there yet.
Yeah, and that's why I say this process is going to be long, because parking is a whole nother can of worms, even just beyond site plan review, because we have like the downtown district doesn't have any more nuanced parking than the general district and the rest of the town, and obviously it's a different creature entirely as far as availability of parking and things like that. So we're going to, as this process unrolls over years, that's on our list. It's just not high on our list yet, because
Right.
we have
Okay.
other fish to fry
Thank
first.
you.
So, Ruth or Alva, do you have any questions for Courtney?
No
questions for me. All right, thank you. Shelley?
So I have a question on the site view replan. Just, I wanted to talk
To Courtney.
to Courtney with this. This is the first I've seen this. But we don't really have, Courtney, a definition or an understanding of what our town character is, and it's written through the whole, in our bylaw and in this, and it should be in our special permit. Like, we need to start defining a little bit what our town character is, and like on the first page on C, it says to ensure the placement and aesthetics of the proposed development. I just feel like aesthetics, how do we define that a little more and break that down to explain our town character? What do we mean by aesthetics? On page 3 on the site review plan, I see F is town character, and it talks about the setbacks and a little bit of the townscape, but I wonder if we could sort of expand that a little bit to define, to give a better understanding of what really is our town character. And then on page 4, I like the idea of a site design, placement of building structures, and that might help us sort of like define that in a design plan. So I was just wondering if you could sort of expand or help us with that kind of understanding of how we could go about that and explain it better as we're starting to define this. And should we have town character as a definition? So those are the questions I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, so at the top of page 4, that was one of the things that we pointed out in the notes section. Part of it is part of using the term town character as a criteria for review is that town character is we proposed modifying that title and calling it architectural style and scale versus town character, because that makes things a bit more clear. Town character is somewhat subjective,
Right.
and so providing actual standards and descriptive language about specific architectural styles and scale makes things a bit more clear, and it also can be clearly defined versus kind of having this buzzword of community character or town character. And again, that also is one of the reasons why we wanted to include those additional sections within each one of the existing and proposed zoning districts to clarify and provide a description of style, scale, and the existing context of that area. If that makes sense. If you look at the example of the general use district, the mock-up that we did, there's a section that outlines intended uses, including the purpose statement, and having things that signal the type of character and the scale of development within those specific districts.
Right.
Is it something that should maybe be put into the definition, architectural style and scale?
Yes.
Once it's figured out.
Excuse me. Yeah, as I just want to team back on this a little bit, because we have a lot of work to do with simply looking at use and scale of buildings and properties in town. And I know defining town character is important and architectural styles matter. Those are going to be a lot more difficult to get past here in Essex. We need to talk about uses and we need to talk about scale and things like that. So this whole effort is going to be a sort of phased approach, and we need to focus on the priorities of putting protections in for residential neighborhoods and getting to some of that, and also making sure that common areas in town are still reserved for business uses. So point is, we have a lot of work to do, and we need to have a cake built before we can start to ice it. And to me, town character and defining architectural styles is the icing on the cake. And when we've sort of got things sorted out in a better overall plan in place, then we can start to add some more of these nuances. And what I don't want to do is lose traction on defining some of the things that we need to do by having people resist us dictating architectural styles or something like that. So we are starting out looking at very practical, basic changes that will give us the ability to put some protections in place and to have sort of better guardrails around what's appropriate in different areas in town. And this, the MAPC is involved with us through June of 2024. And we're going to try and do a lot of work between now and the end of that project, but we're still going to have a significant amount of updating to do after that, because there's a lot of work to do, and it's not all going to happen in 2 or 3 town meetings. So we're just getting started, and we have to kind of focus on the really big picture right now to get some things done. So I just want to keep that sort of perspective on things, because like if you, and everyone's got the handouts that MAPC had prepared for, say, the general use zoning district, and then there was character description and purpose and things like that. And at our last planning board meeting, we talked about that. And, even, and this is sort of what I'm talking about as far as MAPC is developing a long-term document that has a lot more in it than what we're going to be going for in the short term. So the planning board talked about the general use district, and while the photograph and things like that are helpful, we think at this point just trying to codify that district at its very bare bones is the most important thing. And we don't want to lose that in trying to put too much language about what it is and what it isn't and things like that. So you'll see that in the handout that I prepared. We're starting to look at how we formalize this new general use district, and it's really just putting in place what is there now. So I don't know if that makes sense. I'm not trying to say that we would not want to go for a more developed bylaw at some point, because we can always add more later on. But right now the priority is simply to get the general use zoning district established and have the ability to use it in some of the other standard tables we're developing, and then also to talk about other uses. So anyway, I hope I'm making sense, but if anyone has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I think we can start to go through what exactly the planning board is looking at for the articles at fall town meeting. You guys have any questions or comment? Nope. Okay. So I have prepared, it's a draft handout. I gave everyone a copy of it. I am going to share my screen, put it up there. So it is there for recording, and kind of walk through it. So at this point, the planning board is looking at, I'm sorry if I keep going in and out here. Don't want to choke on it either. We're looking at 8 articles, and the handout I prepared is to give you a status as of now, where we are, and where the planning board still has some work to do. And again, this is, as I described, this is us taking stuff from what MAPC has prepared for us and sort of paring it down to be able to sort of present a bare bones article that doesn't invite a lot of controversy, but is sort of clear cut, defined, and here's what we're doing, very basic sort of thing. And then as we develop things, we can build it out later on. So the general use zoning district, there's a format in our new bylaw. So section 6-3.3 is the districts, and 3.31, 2, and 3 are the 3 districts that we already have, the 2 Canoma Point districts and the downtown district. So 6-334 would be the 4th and new district, which would be this general use zoning district. And it is basically everything in town that is not any of those other 3 little districts. So using the same format that we have set up in the bylaw for the other districts, we're sort of populating this with just the language to describe purpose, establishment, building types. We'll talk about that. We may insert something there, and we don't need to fill that in to be able to formalize this district. The use regulations are really just a regurgitation of what we currently allow in the general use district, so we're not making any changes to what's allowed right now. We're just turning it into an official district. And so I have here, this is material that Courtney had prepared and given to us, and so we're going to be going through this in a little bit more detail with the planning board, just to make sure that we've caught everything and we've got all the proper references and stuff. But Courtney's done a good job with this, so we're just going to be sort of incorporating them. We're going to talk about parking requirements to be able to incorporate what is already existing in our bylaw. So this will really just reference or repeat that as necessary. Same with accessory structures. So there's a little bit more material we're going to be adding there. This is the dimensional and density regulations, which is what is in effect now. There's nothing new here. It's just reformatted for the general use district. Non-conforming lots and structures. This will likely just send, we have another section in the bylaw that specifically addresses these. So this, at this point, we'll just send you to that. No additional regulations, and then the district map will be a cute little map of Essex with the 3 other districts carved out, because this is everything that they are not. Any questions? Nope. Okay. Moving on. Article 5 is up.
I do have a question. What's the why? Why do we need to have this one district? And I'm not saying to answer it tonight, but I think that that's probably, if we're going to get something passed, we need to understand, why. Whether it's in write-ups, whether it's in forms, whatever, because I think that that's going to be the question.
Right, and I have 2 levels of answers for that, and the one is that in the next, the Articles 6 and 7, we are creating use tables and dimensional regulation tables, which include all 4 districts. So to have it official as a district, it has a spot in these tables. Yeah. So that's kind of the easy answer. The other answer is that between now and annual town meeting, we're going to start looking really hard at where we need to draw some residential districts in town. And if and when we're able to do that, the areas that are not carved out into a residential district would remain in the general use district. So it establishes that sort of baseline for Essex, and then we can work from there. And so it would be harder to, without the general use district, to start to carve off residential districts, because it leaves this sort of everything else hanging. And even, we never had a general use district because the whole town was one district, and then when the Canoma Point stuff happened, we had to draw districts because the sizes of the lots are so small there, and then the downtown district came along. So this is just sort of a next logical step, because we actually already now have districts, is to make the rest of it one district. So in here for Article 5 is going to be the updates to the definitions, and you saw the document that Courtney presented, and is here also. It's a 24-page homework assignment for the planning board, and what that is going through our existing definitions, which have been included here, and then we're also want to make sure that we sort of do a pass through the bylaw to make sure there aren't other definitions that should be included. So I know, for example, we've already, with the Canoma Point district, run into the definition of a story and a half, because that is a requirement in the Canoma Point district, but it's not defined. So we sort of had to wing it. which is not how we should have to operate. So that's Article 5. I did not include that here because I think we all have this 24-page document, and that's what the planning board's going to be working through in the next couple weeks as well. That's Article 5, which is our second. So we have 4 through 11. So Article 6 is the dimensional and density regulations. In Section 6.5, which is the new section that addresses this right now because we have the general use district, what's in that section only addresses what was standard for all of town. But now that we do have Southern Canoma Point, Central Canoma Point, Essex Downtown District, and hopefully the General Use District, these are all put in sort of one-stop shopping table here of dimensional requirements. So again, there's nothing new here. This is all existing stuff in our bylaw. This is just reorganizing it in a more user-friendly, easy-to-find format.
Lisa, are all these articles standalone so that if, let's say 4 of them pass and some of them don't, what happens then?
Right. So that's one reason that I'm trying to keep the general use district really simple, is because that needs to pass to make
Right.
Articles 6 and 7 useful, because it's dimensional and regulation tables that include the general use district. So if Article 4 does not pass, we're just going to skip 6 and 7 because they include the general use district. But I'm hoping that for, like the reorganization of the bylaw is a fairly no-brainer because it changes absolutely nothing. It just draws a little line around town,
Yep.
So. Article 5 with definitions can still go forward, but the Article 6 and 7 will be dependent, and I make a note on my handout here that, so here, this is, this article depends on the approval of Article 4 by town meeting. So that's Article 6. And again, it's not any new information that's not already in our bylaw. Same thing for Article 7, table of permitted uses, which will go in our new section 6-4 use regulations. This is no new information, no changes to what's allowed anywhere. It's just organizing it into a table that allows comparison from one district to the other in the same spot without skipping from district to district. So that is using all the uses that are currently defined in our bylaw and organizing them in a table. What you don't see here and what Courtney's document will have is these hyperlinks here. If you were using the online document, these would take you directly to the section that talks about the definition of that use. So that is Article 7. Article 8 is the first article where we'll be actually adding language. So the permitted uses in Essex right now are residential, business, motel, hotel, and industrial class A and B. So that's existing. So what we're proposing here is to provide more detail about what is included as residential and what is included as business. So this is just a starter list. Courtney has provided other categories, and this is something the planning board's going to be working on next week too, is to look at what we think would be appropriate. So any input that people have for these categories would be helpful. The reason for doing this is that when we go to do residential districts in May, understanding that Essex is unique in that for so many years we've had the ability to have any use anywhere in town, we're hoping to be able to provide some of sort of transition districts or nuanced districts that would allow certain businesses and not necessarily others. So it could be a residential district that, for example, allows professional offices or something like that. So we want to be able the reason for doing this is so that we can provide some more nuance when we do go to drawing districts. So we're not just taking areas and making them exclusively residential, because Essex has already a lot of properties that have a business running off of them and or home occupation. So we want to make sure that we sort of preserve that aspect of it, allowing people to do certain things on their property, but what we're trying to prevent is sort of full-blown commercial coming into neighborhoods, because right now you have that ability, and making them not really feel like residential neighborhoods anymore. So that's the purpose of this, trying to expand the permitted uses. If anyone has any questions, feel free to interrupt me.
I have the business uses. It appears that we're kind of missing a category like healthcare, dentist, doctor's office, acupuncture. I don't think that falls under personal service, but I may be wrong. Do we need another?
Yeah, no, this is a starter list, so that's what, write down anything and everything that comes to mind, because we'll be going through this next week at our meeting and adding to this as we see fit. That's going to be one of our conversations for next week, so. But yeah, I picked some of them out here as an example, and yeah, I don't know whether that, it's not personal service, would be professional services, or, and that's what we talk about.
Healthcare.
It also is clarified with the update of the definition. So it, for example, it would say office uses include professional, and it lists that in the updated definitions. It would reference what type of office use is considered is considered an office use as it's listed. My point is, additional clarity is provided. That's why it's so important to update the definitions and the uses at the same time as well, and ensuring that each listed use has an actual definition that's listed in the bylaw.
Right, yeah, and I do mention here that these uses will need to appear in the definitions if they're not there. So anything that's added here that's not defined will get in this article added to definitions. It won't be in the first article that updates our definitions, but this article would change this list, but can also insert that definition as part of this article in the definitions section.
How does that work? How's that written? What is it on 9?
8. That's 8.
It's, you're saying that this article then, how will people understand that the new definitions will be updated from this? Like, will it say it?
Yep, it'll spell it out, because if we define this, then part of this article will be having that definition added to, and we'll put in the definition section in the bylaw that it gets added to. So it's all, this will all go through the lawyer, so it'll be clear in the article. Right, Brendan?
Of course it will.
See? So Article 9 is update to site plan review, and Courtney gave us a good walk through some of the recommendations and suggestions that MAPC is making around changes that we could make there. So what I've included here are really sort of the talking points that Planning Board will be focusing on in our meeting next week on the 4th. And the first is the tiered review categories to include minor and major, or whatever we want to call them. And then development of more detailed review categories or criteria. Again, Courtney walked through those in more detail, so I won't go through those. it includes better guidelines on the application process. And then the other thing that we do need to include is a category for, and I don't honestly know if it's state or town or both, MS4 stormwater requirements. It's a state requirement and the town is developing them, and Brendan's going to answer this.
It's actually a federal requirement. There are some regions of US EPA in the country that have delegated this to the state, but in Massachusetts, we're one of just a few states where the EPA is directly handling the compliance with MS4.
And we discussed this at the check-in last week. The only change that we're making will be under the review criteria for noting and citing the town's existing stormwater bylaw, which is in the general bylaws, but is not a part of the zoning bylaw. So noting, citing that in the section in the review criteria for site plan review, and I think the current language cites the state's stormwater handbook, and it needs to specifically cite the town's existing stormwater bylaw, and that's the only update that we have to do in terms of MS4.
For our process, okay.
And I would say that when you do that, you need to say, the town stormwater bylaw as may be amended from time to time, because the stormwater bylaw is going to keep changing as EPA continues to roll out more and more onerous requirements.
Yeah, that's why we only cite it. We tell people where to look and look for updated criteria.
Yeah, and certainly once it does change, as long as the number doesn't change, you're right, Courtney. They'll go to that number, and if a month later it's something new that was approved at town meeting, then they'll see that.
So, you guys have seen what MAPC's presented, and you don't even have to say now, but if you have any input on the site plan review process that you would like us to consider, please feel free to weigh in, whether it's now or between now and next week, or now and when we finalize site plan review process in a couple more weeks. Article 10 is additional special permit categories. So we have a section in the bylaw, which is section 64.3, which is uses requiring special permit. And we already have A through M uses that require special permit in our bylaw. But there are a number of other uses that we're looking to potentially add, and we're looking for input on this and or any other suggestions or things that might not be worth pursuing right now. So we're just trying to refine the list and hone in on something to finalize this article. So so that said, this is the kind of article we might go for 5 or 6 categories to be new special permit categories, and if any one of them is particularly controversial, we would be able to amend the article on the floor and take it off. So we would not let the whole article get shot down if enough people objected to kennels, for example, and we didn't want to do that. We can amend it on the floor, take that out, and keep the article going for the rest of them. So that's why they're all sort of in one article, as opposed to going for 7 different articles for 7 different categories. If any one of them is controversial, we could amend it on the floor. So these are the ones that we've talked about now. We're going to talk about it more in the planning board meeting. And if people have thoughts on these, we'd be eager to hear those. We want to try and look for uses that the special permit process what it requires is a hearing, a butter notification, public hearing, and an advertised public hearing. And then at the end of the process, if the use is approved, the planning board writes a special permit decision, and that decision actually gets recorded with the property deed. So it is a legal record that follows the property. So that's why special permit is a whole lot stronger than the site plan review process. The special permit also gives the planning board, which, as the permit granting authority, the ability to deny something if it's not appropriate. Because the uses that are defined as requiring a special permit are not as of right. They are by special permit. So it's not anything we put in here, even though we have a general use district that lets pretty much everything else go. It's everything can be done except for what is in special permit. So that's why we have these categories, because it does give us a lot more authority over what can happen in these particular categories.
So do you need to establish criteria for each of the special uses?
It would be nice,
Yeah,
but you don't have to.
okay.
Because
So you
right
can be
now,
arbitrary potentially for adult entertainment. We don't want it here because it's too close to these 5 houses, but it's okay over there where there's a house, 100 yards away, that type of thing.
right, I mean,
Yeah.
ideally, the point now is to get these uses captured so that we have control over them.
Yeah.
Any special permit category, it's much better to provide guidelines in your bylaw so that an applicant knows what you're
Yeah.
looking for or what you're not looking for. So we have a bunch of categories in our bylaw right now that are just sort of single word definitions: airports, nursing homes. And it doesn't tell anyone what you can or can't do with a nursing home. It just says if you want a nursing home, it's a special permit. And then that leaves everything up to the special permit granting authority. So it's much better to have language around it, but it's also important to capture it sooner than later so that we do have controls on these things.
Yep.
So,
So, and you're saying the special permit goes on the deed, so if I wanted to have adult entertainment, it's on my deed, so the next person who buys my house can have that adult entertainment also?
correct.
I'm not gonna have adult entertainment, just so you know.
Well, we wouldn't approve it anyway. You're in a residential neighborhood.
We have landscape companies in there.
We have storage units, outdoor storage, bulk storage, salvage, so that's,
That's different.
right.
If
So, but-
storing stuff, though, you capture them there.
What's that?
If the landscape is storing vehicles, trees, shrubbery, that sort of stuff, that's captured there, or no?
That could, and that's why this is sort of the starter list, and we do want to work on it and refine it.
Yeah, that's an important one, that, whatever it was, the,
Landscape companies, just because it's the trucks. It's a whole interference in a residential neighborhood with the businesses and the trucks and the equipment and the fixing of the equipment. I don't think it's in there, and I just thought of it.
Right, and we'd have to talk about whether that's a special permit or if that's going to be controlled by districts.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'll talk about it. I'm just saying there are different ways to control things like, so.
Or if it's a home occupation, if it falls under the home occupation bylaw, depending on how many employees they have and how many cars are there,
Exactly.
how much equipment's there.
Well, again, like, this is an example on Water Street, with that community coming in and the trucks and the loudness and the lights, and, I mean, it's disrupting a whole, if it continues. I'm just saying we need to
Right.
think about that, because it is disruption to a residential community.
Well, Water Street may end up being one of those streets that if the general use district is adopted at annual town meeting, Water Street would likely become a residential street and not someplace where you would allow for a landscape company to be.
But like,
How do you do that, though? I mean, we've got how many landscape companies in this town? It feels to me like we're cutting off somebody's head
But-
by saying a landscape company. Dan Mayer, his trucks drive by at 7 a.m. every morning, and I listen to them. And when I listen to them, the whole town shakes when they drive by. I don't have a problem. It's a business. I don't want to.
But that's driving by your vehicle on a state route. I think we're talking about something on a dead-end street that has 7 houses. Is that the appropriate spot for landscape business? Also remember that anything that's what I consider pre-existing non-conforming is grandfathered in. You can't tell somebody, oh, you've had a landscape company on the backside of Shelley's house for 15 years and now it needs to go away. I think that's what Lisa's saying, is that's part of the deed. It's already existing, it's not gonna change, but it's not gonna allow for future development into that particular industry, whatever it may be.
Right.
It could be adult entertainment, on Water Street.
No, Alva's gonna do that one.
I got that on Martin Street.
Well, the town can handle more than one.
So, anyway, this is a list we'd started from the last planning board meeting, and we'll be talking about it and deciding which are the most important categories to bring to town meeting. And so any input people have will be helpful too. And then, last but not least, we are looking to extend the temporary moratorium, which is just a moratorium on change of use of residential or open space to business or industrial. And it doesn't affect anything that's already existing. It's not a commercial construction moratorium, anything other than change of use of residential and open space to commercial or industrial. And the reason that was put in, and it was voted twice fairly well supported at town meeting, it's giving the planning board with MAPC's assistance the opportunity to understand what we can do to provide some protections for residential neighborhoods. And what we've learned so far is site plan review process is not going to do that as long as a use is allowed by right and in the bylaw and in the district that you're in, say in the general use district, if that's formalized, we don't have the ability to deny it in any way. And the only way that we can do that is through actual districting. So between, if these articles do pass, between this town meeting and Springtown meeting, we're going to be doing a really hard look at where we could draw residential districts. And if by some strange twist of fate that actually came to pass at town meeting, this article is also going to allow the planning board to rescind the moratorium before the expiration date, which would be, this article asks to extend it from January 1st, 2024 to January 1st, 2025. But if we're successful with enough reasonable protections in May, then we would have the ability to rescind rescind the moratorium in advance of its sunset date for this article. So.
At a regular scheduled meeting, planning board meeting.
It would be a public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, the article is written.
It would be following the public notice for zoning bylaws,
Yeah.
as if that's, so that there's plenty of public notice in accordance with the procedures in the law.
So, that's it.
Fingers crossed?
I'm sorry?
Fingers crossed?
We'll see.
You guys got a lot to do at October 4th or whenever your next meeting is.
Yep,
A lot of things to hash out.
yep.
So speaking of that, and I know you have a draft schedule set out, Lisa, how many days in advance of your planning board meeting of October 18th do you want the town council reviewed draft? You don't want it that day, that's not going to help you.
Right, I'm going to see how we do on the 4th, because some of these articles are going to be easier than others. So it's not going to be, I don't see all 8 moving together, because we may need more time to drill down through the definitions, but that's also going to be a lot easier review for town council, kind of thing. So,
True, but I mean, what is your maximum window you're gonna give town council? So if you have a meeting on the 4th, and you need the weekend to get something to me to get to town council, that's the 9th, I believe, which is a holiday, so that's the 10th. And if you want the planning board to have access to the reviewed bylaws, or proposed bylaws, for the 18th, let's say the following Monday, the 16th, that doesn't leave a lot of time for town council to review it. So I'm really trying to work on what that's going to be right now, or you're going to run into a real problem, because then on the 23rd, the selectmen are going to be signing the warrant with whatever it is decided.
I know. We're trying.
All right, well, we'll talk on the 5th then, won't we?
Yep.
The 4th is gonna be a late night, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, for sure. Into the morning.
No, it sounds, I think it sounds like a lot of work, but we all have the material ahead of time, and we'll try to keep the meeting moving. And the thing too is, with something like definitions, we're not required to overhaul every single definition in what we have. We can look at the ones that really need work and the ones that we need to add and concentrate on those. We don't have to sit there and have a 15-minute conversation about all 60 definitions that are there. They've been working fine. We need to find out the ones that are problematic, the ones that are new, and the ones that need to be modified. So, even though it looks like a lot of work on definitions, they don't all have to happen. We can come back with updated definitions, at every town meeting for the next 6 years if we wanted to. So we don't have to get it all done at this meeting. All right. Joan thinks I do need to have it all done, apparently.
That was a sign.
She's disagreeing. So, if we get into the weeds on special permit categories and we can't agree on it, maybe we agree on 4 of them and we don't agree on the last 3. So we bring 4. We don't, it's not, we don't have to achieve perfection this time. Like the general use district, we're trying to keep it as absolutely bare bones as it can be, to say, this is just putting a line around what's there and putting it into words to describe what's there and not changing anything. And so if at a later time we want to build it out, we have the ability to do that. We're trying to keep it simple and straightforward to get it through. So we're just trying to pick off the things that really matter. Like I said, so we don't have to do every single definition. They're all here. This is MAPC's job, is to help us through this, but it's a shopping list for us. We can say, let's just pick these 16 definitions, because if I have to stand on town meeting floor and explain 60 definitions, it's going to be a late night for everyone that night. So we're going to have to prioritize and do the important stuff now, so which is what we're trying to do, because 8 articles, I know, is a lot for planning board at town meeting. And
For
so
a November meeting, and there's a lot of information here, and I think that keeping it simple is your best chance of getting something passed than trying to put so much.
right,
people's-
yeah, and so that's why I'm saying.
Right now, I'm
we
looking
don't-
at this going,
Right, that's why I'm saying we don't need to overhaul every single definition. Courtney's given us this, basically a shopping list, and we can pick out 12 that we want to focus on right now that seem to be the most critical. And we'll still have that same shopping list that we can go back to next time and say, hey, we need to add these other 6 because we're seeing that they might make a difference.
Do you think, though, that you might be opening a bit of a Pandora's box? Because all 60 definitions are gonna be available to the public, and some of them have never seen the definitions at all, and they may have a problem with them, where nobody has in the past.
So we won't, when we bring the actual article to town meeting that addresses the definitions, is only going to have things that change.
Okay,
So they're not going to see, they're only going to, the town meeting,
The ones that
the
are
warrant article will
arguable,
only
yeah.
talk about changes. So it'll be struck through and boldface, that's how we always do it, is,
Yeah.
you know, or if we're just adding a definition, it's just boldface, here's something new.
Yep.
So it's not, they're not gonna be seeing, it's only gonna be the ones that we're changing. So same with special permit categories, we're not gonna be looking at all the special permit categories that already exist, we're just going to be saying, we wanna do NOPQR, these 5 new categories.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
That simplifies
Yeah,
it.
the actual article only has specific change.
Good.
So like when we do site plan review, the existing site plan review article will be there, whatever we're taking out struck, and whatever we're adding in boldface, and it will just be that. So it won't be that long.
Good.
No questions from me.
No, I think it looks like you got a good plan in place, path to follow. It is still gonna be a long October 4th meeting, but that's okay. We'll get through it.
And we can always, we're also posting for the 11th with the zoning ambassadors too. So if we need to revisit a few things, I mean, and the planning board has, the ability, we could post for a Monday night if we needed to finalize some things. We'll see, hopefully. Hopefully everyone does their homework. I know Judd's done his, Shelley's done hers.
I'll be there. I'll be there on Zoom. Have connection.
Any other questions? Antonella?
I do have a question.
You go to their antenna, they won't hear you at home, if there's anyone at home.
So I just have a couple of quick questions. When I was looking at the handout for the general use, if someone wanted to put in like an airport or a research and development lab, that would require a special permit. And I'm just wondering if you think that the special permit process that we currently have is robust enough to prevent that from going like on my street, for example, like an airport, like that's, I'm just wondering, like, is the special permit process already robust enough that we're not changing that? We're just adding different categories?
Correct. The special permit process, where something isn't, like for airports, where there isn't any criteria, it's actually, gives the planning board a whole lot of latitude, because we are the special permit granting authority, and there are no criteria for airports, so it actually lets us
Potentially deny it.
or condition it and say, well, you can only have a runway that's 200 feet long, and you can only land, planes that hold one person. So that's without better guidelines. So adding guidelines in the bylaw actually helps people who want to apply so that they could understand better. But right now, when we just slap a category in there, it gives a lot of latitude to the planning board as a special permit granting authority about how they can condition it.
Okay, thank you. And then, so then I'm looking for the categories that you have on the additional special permit, Article 10. So adult entertainment and shooting ranges. So, I'm not a huge fan of shooting ranges. I wouldn't want one near anyone's house. But I'm just wondering if, I guess this just goes with the whole airport thing that you just explained. I just don't feel like that would fit our town character. Neither would an airport, neither would an adult entertainment place. So I kind of just want to sort of rest in the special permit process and in you all that these things would not be appropriate next to homes. Yes?
Right, yeah. That's,
I don't think I'm being crystal clear. I think, and I'm sorry for that, but I just want to rest in the fact that the special permit process is robust enough and that these new bylaws are protective enough that we as residents don't necessarily have to worry because we have it written here, and you're telling me, well, the fact that there are no regulations in the town of Essex for airports gives you so much more weight or latitude, I guess, to control it.
So the real answer to that is what protects residences is putting them in a residential district. And when you put a residential district down, you say there's nothing allowed here except residences. And so you can't even bring an airport with a special permit
'Cause it's a
into
residential. Okay.
a residential neighborhood. So that's the best protection.
Your little squares around residential neighborhoods does make me a little nervous, though, because I don't know where those are going to be. Like
We don't
in the
either.
spring. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so that's going to be, it's going to be a public process rolling them, you know, MAPC is going to help us draw some initial maps and looking at those and getting public feedback on those. So we don't know where the residential, when you look at town, you can easily say there are streets that are residential ones, and then there are a lot of streets that have both residential and commercial right now. So those are going to
Yes.
be where we start to, I don't want to say run into problems, but are going to need to have a little bit more nuance than, you know, maybe straight residential, or this is residential with light commercial. It's a whole process we haven't even started yet. But
Okay.
my point is that right now when we talk about special permits, that's because anything can go anywhere. And you're relying on the special permit granting authority to have the wisdom and authority to be able to say, well, no, you can't put an airport in this residential neighborhood. But if and when that residential neighborhood becomes a residential district, even if you're allowed to have an airport by special permit, you
Can't go there.
you won't be able to have a special permit in that district.
Okay. And then I just had one quick question in terms of, I'm sorry, it's such a popular topic tonight, but for the adult entertainment, I thought that just with Manchester Friends, I know that they had just passed a bylaw to ban it, because I thought the reason they did that, and I might be wrong, but I thought the reason they did that was because it's protected under like freedom of speech or something, and that if it's not in your bylaw to ban it, then you can't deny it.
That's why it's here. Because you can't deny it unless you give yourself the ability to deny it. And you can't even completely deny it, but you can regulate it. Which is another reason that residential districts are important.
I think we should just have a bylaw to ban it, but I'm not going to be that girl.
What's that?
I was already the pot shop girl. I can't be the strip joint girl.
Also having adequate definitions that actually defines what is considered an adult use or what is considered an office use is important. Having those definitions to be able to call a thing what it is. If it's not accurately defined, then that leaves things open to interpretation, and that's one of the challenges that we're trying to alleviate, or one of the issues we're trying to alleviate for the planning board, who is then left to have to decide, you know, when we say office, because it's not clearly defined in the bylaw, do we mean like an office park, or are we talking about an insurance office that is next door to a dry cleaner? So it provides more clarity and understanding, not just for a business owner who's looking to open a business, but also the planning board, who has to make these decisions and determinations on whether a use is permitted or not.
Right. So it's, yeah, anything we do, we, like you say, always have to track that back to definitions and make sure that that is clearly defined.
But just to clarify some of what Antonella was asking, our work going forward is in special permits also and working through regulations and sort of like fine tuning it, right? Yes, so,
Yeah, we would want to build it out more. We want to make it a good bylaw, but we can't do it overnight. We're starting in,
right, so, but that's what we're working towards May. Right?
for,
Special permit categories and regulations, and that's what the next step.
right, for special permit, yeah, building them out more. I don't,
Yeah.
if we're tackling zoning districts in May, I will, and we don't have to do them all at once. We can cell tower or whichever ones as they become necessary, and we get to them, we'll build them out. It just, it's a process.
But I think it's important to say, Lisa, with talking about adult entertainment and shooting ranges, if they don't fall under special permit, they don't fall anywhere, which means we have no guardrails. I think that's the important piece to this, which is in a town with no district zoning, anything goes anywhere. The point of this is to instill some protection just by categorizing it and giving it a quick one word on the paper, which was how we got here.
Right.
That's super important to say at town meeting, because people don't get that.
That's the easy answer, right?
Yeah.
That if it's not on the piece of paper, you can do it any way you want to.
Yep.
Any other questions? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
You don't have to.
You don't have to, but I do.
You're not in session.
We are in session, Simone's on.
Oh, okay.
But I think Simone hung up.
She's gone now.
She was gone a little
She's
while
gone now, but we
Yeah,
were, she
you
was
were.
on, yeah. Good.
Second.
All those in favor?
No, I'm here. Motion to adjourn.
Oh, she's there.
Oh, so Judd already made the motion, so, and Shelley
Second.
seconded it, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I apologize, Simone, you disappeared off our screen in the room here.
Oh, that's okay. No worries.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:30 PM.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you,
Yeah, thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all this.